Starting and we're recording.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to HD's office hours for ESG. My name is Anthony Zepeda, and I will be your moderator for today's office hours. We're going to hold for just a minute or two for more of our colleagues to join us for today's session. In the meantime, we want to invite you to all introduce yourselves in the chat with your name and the region you represent. We will begin in about 1 minute. If you're just signing on, we are waiting about 30 more seconds to get started. Please introduce yourself in the chat with your name and the region you represent. And we'll get started in just a second. Okay, I think we are ready to get started. Again, welcome to this week's office hours for ESG. If you're just joining, my name is Anthony Zepeda, and I am today's moderator. And if you are just joining us, we're going to go ahead and get started, but please go ahead and introduce yourself with your name and the region you represent in the chat. As a quick reminder, this office hours is being recorded for public record. And a second reminder is that HCD has a policy that we do not allow any AI note takers, excuse me. I was going to say AI note taking machines. I don't know why, but AI note takers, we don't allow those in our public meetings. So please disable your note taker if you are using one, or we will have to remove you from the meeting. Next slide, please. Let's see here. Is just a quick progress check here. Can people see the PowerPoint on the screen? Sam, Tim, Tuesday?
Yeah, I see it.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I can see it, Anthony.
And can we get something? I'm just going to recommend this one time. In the chat, you can see the PowerPoint screen on the screen. And it looks like yes. So I cannot see the PowerPoint. So I'm going to guess that we're on slide 2, how to ask a question. All questions must be submitted in the question box. Please type your organization and question into the question box. The ESG team will read questions out loud, both during the presentation, at the end of the presentation, and we will provide answers throughout, both written within the Q&A box and also out loud, time permitting. Alongside myself, we also have the ESG team, the ESG specialists, and the ESG program manager. So you've got the whole crew on board ready to answer your questions. And just that last reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A box, as when we put them in the chat, they tend to get lost. And let's go to slide 3. And as everyone may have already heard, I can't see the slides. So I'm going off a PowerPoint, the same PowerPoint, but on my screen. And I'm going to announce the slides to Gio so he knows we're on the same slides. But we should be on slides and recording right now. And both the slides and the recording will be available to all participants on the ESG webpage within approximately 2 to 3 weeks from today's session. Next slide, please. For today's agenda, we will begin with our standard general ESG updates and announcements. We'll be following that with the part 2 of our Submitting RFFs Spotlight series. And then, given how much time we have, we'll open up the floor for general technical assistance and do our best to address any questions that you may have. Let's go to slide 5. And this slide should be for 2025 funding allocation updates. We touched on this last month, but we're going to reiterate it now to get the point home. We are going to be updating your 2025 budgets in eCivis with your 2025 ESG funding allocation. We have received the budgets from all of our grantees. If you have not approved your amendment in eCivis, please do so ASAP. Review the budgets and the documents, and then just hit the approval button. It doesn't have to be finalized now if you only have a general idea of how you want to spend the money in the next fiscal year. That's fine. However, you can make changes afterwards, and we will work with you to do that. But don't make any changes now. I'm going to repeat that at the end of this announcement, but don't make any changes. If you have questions on the way the budget looks, contact your grant representative, and we'll work with you on that. So how does that relate to the RFFs for?
Oh, Anthony, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I just wanted to say that the status of the 2025 funding right now is that we are in the process of sending out award letters. And so all of the grantees in the next week or so should be getting their award letters for the 2025 funding. And after that, we'll start the process of putting the amendments into eCivis, and then it'll be your time to start approving them. So it's a little ways off. You shouldn't see them yet.
Thank you, Tuesday. And then, as I mentioned, one last note: when reviewing your budgets, don't change anything in eCivis. It can really mess up the process. If you have questions or need to make changes, just contact your grant rep, and they will help you do so and make the whole process smooth. And so you'll get your funds, and that's always good news. So let's go to slide 6, the 2024 contracts. For your current 2024 contracts, if you revert to, I believe it is Exhibit E of your 2024 contract, it'll identify expenditure deadlines, meaning you have to expend a certain percentage of your award by a certain date. Both those numbers will be in the exhibit in your contract with HGCD, your current contract. And it's imperative that you are aware of those and that you're working with your grant rep to make sure you're meeting the expenditure deadlines. If you need assistance in reaching your expenditure milestone, you can always reach out to your grant representative. They can help you figure out ways that you might not be aware of, or you may be aware of, to submit your expenditure requests on time and perhaps for larger draws on your next RFF. But once again, it's always best to reach out to your grant representative, and they can assist you in doing so. And let's go to the next slide, which should be the combined HPD and ESG office hours. Last month, we mentioned that we are going to be changing office hours to a combined format with the Housing Policy Division's HAP group, and we will be combining the ESG office hours with theirs. First session will be next month on April 21st, 2026. It'll generally take place on the third Tuesday of each month from 10 a.m. to noon. The first hour will be the HAP and their respective grant programs. The second hour will be the ESG office hours. You should have received a new registration invite yesterday. I think those went out at about mid-afternoon. It should have come in an email with a calendar invite. I want to just take a pause here. And once again, I'm not sure how, we don't have a poll set up right now, but I want to have a general idea of, if you've received it, how about giving us a thumbs up and the reactions? And if you have not, you can submit a question or a concern, or just here, send it to this address if we had a wrong, if something was updated, and we can shoot you the email with the calendar invite. And so once again, I'll keep going back to this. I can't see the screen. So did we get some thumbs up, ESG team?
No thumbs that I could
Here,
see.
I'm gonna create a poll really quickly.
Okay, thank you. So everyone, this Geo, our technical whiz, is going to create a poll very quickly.
So, Anthony, this is Tim. It looks like we did get one response in the chat from Jen, from Jenna Atka. So,
Okay.
Ryan, would you mind kind of noting that down? We can reach out to Jen after this to
I've
get her the invitation.
Okay, yeah.
sorry to interrupt him.
Good.
I've put the poll up, so please answer. Thank you. Give it a couple minutes.
And we'll wait a couple seconds to do that poll. How many? We've got about 20 people online.
I see Dee Dee with Lacta also wrote in the question and answer box that she did not receive
Okay,
an
good.
invite.
Glad we've got this information now. And so 16 of 19 have responded. And then Jen and Dee Dee. So that should be everyone has responded.
Yeah, that should be about everybody. So it looks like a majority, only
Majority
two.
did not receive the email invite yet. So make sure to check your spam folder.
Yep.
The email will be coming from the HPD Homeless Grants at HCD. And it has the email contains the announcement and the dates and a Zoom link. It also contains a calendar link attachment that you can click on and approve, and it will then populate to your calendar for every third Tuesday for the next year. And there is a question in the chat from Jewel that our region is also a HAP grantee. Congratulations. I think about 50% of our grantees are, so you should receive it. They have that office hour link. If it is the same, we already have this link perhaps. No, it'll be a new email. If you're already in HAP, I think it'll just be, you'll get the same email, and the calendar invite will just be a different title, HPD and DFFA grant office hours. So if you're a current HAP subscriber and your email address is current, you will receive the email.
And it will be for a 2-hour time period instead of for 1 hour.
Yes. All right, glad we did that.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I'm just going to interject real quick. So, thank you, Giovanni, for doing that poll for us, for everybody here. That is lovely. Great feature for jumping in and doing that. So, I just want to make sure everybody who's here. So, I know some of us, maybe a little shy. We may not want to put it in the chat or come off mute. So, but please do let us know. Please let your ESG rep know if you did not receive this invite. We want to make sure that everybody is on schedule to attend next month. We understand it's on a different day of the week, and so if people on this call today have a standing meeting during the third Tuesday of that week, we definitely understand. If there's going to be scheduling conflicts, we definitely understand that. So, but however, if you are going to integrate this into your weekly schedule for office hours, this new process, we want to make sure that everyone gets the invite. So it's great to see that Jewel, already is a part of the HChat process, so she should have already gotten that email. So, but please email us. Please email your rep if you didn't get the invite. We want to make sure that you have the invite ahead of time, so there's everybody is set to go for next month. Okay, thanks. Back to you, Anthony.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, and thank you, team, for your assistance. Gio, let's go to slide number 8, ESG team representatives. And you've heard me referring to your grant representatives several times. Here is our ESG team: Sam, Gio, and Ryan. They cover the majority of our contracts. If you have any questions, please reach out to one of our team members. And also, you can reach out to the ESG NOFA inbox, which is monitored Monday through Friday during normal business hours. And next slide, please. And this should be the general questions slide. do we have any questions so far on the updates?
There's only one comment from Ben about Santa Clara is a HAP grantee but did not receive the invite. That's the only comment in the Q&A box right now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Gia, let's go to the next slide. And this should be the ESG Office Hours Spotlight Series, Submitting RFFs, Part 2. And let's go ahead and just jump to the next slide, number 11. And hopefully you are seeing a slide, same slide that I'm seeing. And the next two slides, I showed them last week, but we want to make sure to get this point across again. This is really the overall theme of this series. We want to pay our grantees. We want to get that money out there, deployed in your community, achieving your mission, meeting the milestones, and helping your agency complete its mission. We also want to share that ESG, HCD, ESG, we are also a recipient of ESG funds through HUD. So as a direct recipient, the state of California, we are subject to the exact same requirements and regulations that all of you are and all of your subs and sub-subs are. So we just want to let you know, we feel your pain. We know how challenging it can be sometimes, especially when you're new to the grant, kind of get up to speed and get going. But the purpose of these Spotlight series where we focus on, something as standard as RFFs is that we want to help you identify any weaknesses that you might have in your process or challenges and address those challenges and help you make this a more streamlined, linear process that's very predictable, and when the money's coming in, when your RFFs are coming in. Let's go to the next slide, Thea. And so this is, like I said, the second of two slides that I'm bringing forward from last month. And just that quick overview, the required elements of submitting an RFF. You have your RFF form. You have the DER, Detailed Expense Reporting spreadsheet. You have the supporting documentation for the DER spreadsheet. And then there are specific component requirements depending on the nature of your award. Rapid rehousing has very strict requirements, and a lot of them. Homelessness prevention also. Street outreach has requirements. Emergency shelter has requirements. And even HMIS has requirements. Then there are the RFF number requirements. If you recall, you should all have this memorized by now, but your first RFF that you submit for your awards, you have to submit 100% supporting documentation for every single line item on that DER. For your second RFF and onward, you select two lines for each component, and you submit supporting documentation for those 2 line items per component. So we have the RFF requirements, and then there's also the e-civis, which kind of ties it all together, and where we are submitting the RFFs and where HCD is approving the RFFs. And so next slide, please. So submitting RFFs, we're looking at the best practices. And last month, we covered pretty much the most common mistakes that we encounter when, as reviewers of these RFFs, and these were the things that you have to have correct, or we have to send it back. There's no leeway on it. If it's not correct or if it's not filled out correctly, we have to send it back. So we covered those last month, and what we have left are the remaining items that generally grantees will run into, the challenges that they'll run into. And they're pretty broad, but sometimes we can get into very specific areas, like with payroll or indirect costs. But those 6 items that we're going to quickly cover today are naming conventions, the RFF form and e-civis, some best practices, documenting payroll, everyone's favorite PII, or personally identifying information, some of the client file requirements and regulatory requirements of rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention, And then the one that always, makes me pull my hair out is indirect costs. That can be such a tough one, as it's so that, you almost need to be an accountant sometimes to understand it. We have to rely on our finance professionals sometimes to really try and understand it. So we can relate. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started on the Spotlight series. Next slide, please. And we'll start first with some general reminders for best practices. Overall, these are just things to keep in mind. And so when you submit your RFF form in your DER spreadsheet, please do not alter the templates in any way. If you have questions where you need more line items, or you're wondering if you can delete line items, reach out to your grant representative and they can give you some advice and guidance on that. But generally do not alter the RFF form or the DER spreadsheet. Always make sure that you are using the correct coding for each activity on the DER. If you have questions, once again, that's why we're here. We're happy to help on that. The RFF form itself, complete the certification sections. We have a screenshot on that we're going to cover in a second. And then within eCivis, this is always something that gets missed, is check the reimbursement box. It's just a general reminder, and it's a habit to get into. Once you get it down pat, you'll have it down pat. But when you're first starting, it's a good reminder. And let's go to the next slide, Gio. So let's go start off with naming conventions. And for your own edification, we may have members jumping in here and adding information from the ESG team. I welcome that. And if you have questions on this for your own specific agency, please submit those in the Q&A box. But in general, for naming conventions, the whole point of most of these best practices are that we can tie back the DER expense line. For example, if you look at the screen, that example of a DER expense line for rapid rehousing, rental assistant, non-staff costs, direct costs, the example name, and then we just, of course, the rest. What we're trying to do is directly tie that line item back to the supporting documentation. So just picture all of this comes in. If you have subs, you probably go through the same thing. All this information comes in. We get the DER. We have a huge file of supporting documentation. And what will really slow down that process, if it's not labeled correctly, is that we have a DER item for rental assistance, and then we have 30 different clients, and we have to figure, okay, which one here? It's hours and hours of detective work in the past. But as we've streamlined the process and started focusing more on naming conventions and tying the information back directly to the DER line item, it helps to process that RFF quickly. We're always looking for ways. We want to be paid, and we want to do everything we can so that reviewer can quickly review. Yep, all matches, all good. And if it's all good, boom, it gets approved like that. So for this example, we have in the bullets, include your grant number on your RFF DER, your indirect costs calculator, and all supporting documentation. For example, this line item on this assistance for February rent, and then you're going to include, for its rapid rehousing, so you're going to include a supporting documentation client file, and please name that client file the same as the HMIS number identified on the line item. So two things there. Put the HMIS number on the line item of that particular expense or that particular payment, and then have the exact same HMIS number labeled on the client file. And then when we open the client file and you have, say, your rental assistance agreement, same client file number. You have your the check that was used to pay for the deposit. It has a reference to the client file. So if you get what I'm saying, all of them match, and it makes it easy, and we can just look through and yes, verify. And as long as it's good, then it's perfect. And that really speeds up the process of paying RFFs. And before I jump to the next slide, does anyone on the team have anything to add on that?
Hi, it's Tuesday. I would just add, and you said it, but I really want to make sure that people understand when they upload their RFF/DER form that you have your grant number on it, as opposed to saying for quarter 3 or for December and January. When we download this and need to refer back to it, it's going to be in our downloads, and we're not looking for a document that says December. We're looking for a document that says 2024 ESG 00011 RFF2, and it really needs to say that when you upload that into eCivis, so that we're not constantly searching for that document later.
Thank you, Tuesday. And so with naming conventions, let's go to the next slide. And we touched on this a bit in the previous slide, but the client files, one client file, this is kind of hard to say, but one client per client file. So if you have a client file that you have PDF'd and put in a folder and uploaded, that should be for one line item and one client HMIS number per line items. So in the past, sometimes we've received supporting documentation and client files for multiple clients. And those are hard, and they're not organized. And it's very hard to dig through and try and parse out which information is salient to the RFF and which is going to go on another DER line item. So that we touch on that with the HMIS number on each file. It must match the DER expense. File name the same as the line item, so that's the HMIS number. And once again, supporting documentation easily tied to the line item. And let's go to the next slide. So that's the naming conventions. And now we're going to move to the RFF form itself. And just some general reminders. If you have, we'll update and include the previously drawn amount, and I'll have an example slide here in a second. And if the budget was amended, as that often happens during a contract process, include the updated amounts. Don't use the old, make sure you don't use the old form with the old totals on it. Make sure you update the awarded amounts. All the totals on your RFF form must match those that are on the DER and also in eCivis. And please, once again, check the reimbursement box in eCivis. If you're having issues with eCivis, believe it or not, sometimes it's as easy as just logging off and logging back on. So we always recommend that as well before you reach out. But if you are, you can always reach out to us.
And also, eCivis likes you to clear your cookies. If you're having any trouble with eCivis, clear your cookies, clear your cache. It's as simple as that a lot of times.
Yes, very good point, Tuesday. Thank you. Because like I mentioned at the beginning, we go through the same process as you. We work with eCivis just like you. The screens we see are quite different than what you see, but at the same time, we run into the cookie issue all the time. So next slide, Gio, please. We should be on slide number 18, the submitting RFFs, the RFF form. And this is just a completed example of, with the approved budget, previously drawn amounts as applicable, the request this pay period, or request this period, and they're in the year-to-date breakdown. And your totals down at the bottom. And let's go to the next slide. And this is a little farther down, the same RFF form. This area gets missed a lot. People forget it's there, and it is required. The certification section, please check the boxes in the certification section as applicable, and then have the form signed by your authorized representative. And let's go to the next slide. So we've covered the naming conventions, the RFF forms. We're almost halfway there. We're at the best practices for documenting payroll. There's an example below of a DER and then done correctly for documenting payroll. We ask that you have the single line item for each paycheck issued per employee, include their job title in the line item description, and then wages, taxes, and benefits are all included on one line. The information in this DER example, this would be used to support this. Well, this would be supported with payroll related documents if we're requiring supporting documentation for this line item. That can be a general ledger, time cards. In whatever manner your agency documents their payroll, employee payroll and benefits, and it is an example of a generally accepted accounting principle. We are generally going to be able to work with that. So it's really just a matter of these simple best practices. And Tuesday, did you have anything on this one? Tuesday is really our eyes and ears on most of these, and she's the one who can really catch a lot of the errors. And so payroll is one of the areas that she specializes in. And Tuesday, was there anything else on this slide?
What I'm just going to add is that the way you should list on your DER is the way that you're going to support. So we, generally speaking, we're going to ask for some sort of like proof that you've made the payment. So a copy of the ledger that says that you did your automatic deposits or whatever, and we want a copy of or some copy of the pay stubs or that kind of thing. But if your paycheck includes all of the details like the taxes, wages, and benefits, it should be on that same line and easily for us to monitor with the payroll documentation that you're giving us. So that's why we really like it when you include your wages, taxes, and benefits in one line, as opposed to separating them out, because that's the way you're paying the personnel.
Thank you, Tuesday. And as mentioned, we work with our grantees very closely, and we eventually learn their, the rhythm, so to speak. We learn how they put things down, how they record it. But you ever want to reach out to your grant representative and let them know, hey, this is how we record our payroll. This is what we're going to send for supporting documentation, and this is how you can quickly and easily tie it back to the expense. We welcome that because we do that all the time with our grantees. And it really helps speed up the process. Yeah, right. We're moving quickly. Let's go to the next slide, Gio, with PII. And that's not a rabbit hole to fall down at all, but I'm being sarcastic. So personally identifying information, PII, there are very clear federal regulations for this. And then there are very clear California regulations for this, in addition to the federal laws. And this is kind of a silly example, but it is, kind of the extremes of what we run into. If there are problems with PII, what they usually are either the example to the left, which is completely blacked out. There you can't read anything. It's too much redaction. We can't verify anything. We receive rental agreements like this, and we're like, is this for this apartment? Is it for this person? Is it for this HMIS number? We can't tell because everything has been redacted. And then the example on the right is just there's nothing redacted. And so it's not enough redaction, which is very much a federal and California state violation of PII. So next slide, please. So what is a grantee to do? Well, we always recommend taking the Goldilocks approach. I know most of you are familiar with that old fairy tale growing up where she goes into the bear's house and she has the porridge that's too hot. Oh, that's too hot. And she tries the other. Oh, that's too cold. And she has the one that is just right. It's just right. So it's kind of a just right approach. And it can be iterative. We may have to work with you back and forth. But in general, a good rule to follow is you redact the name, you redact the social security number, you redact the date of birth, you redact things like a driver's license number, anything that can be easily and quickly tied back to personally identifying information, you want to redact. One of the best solutions is one that we've been talking about ever since the beginning of this presentation. Use HMIS numbers as identifiers. If you have that HMIS number on all client files, the DER, the supporting documentation, we can then quickly tie every document together, know that, for instance, rapid rehousing, rental assistance check goes directly to that person for this apartment, for these dates, and their certification, homeless certification is here, and all through the file, we can see that. So we're not attempting to complicate the process. We're subject to the same exact PII regulations as you are. These are suggestions, you can think of them in the terminology of today, hacks. These are hacks that we're suggesting that you can use to hopefully get these processed through quickly and easily, and without us having to send them back saying, there's PII here, or wait, who is this person? It's so redacted we can't tell. So once again, work with us, work with your grant representatives, and it's usually something that we can address pretty quickly. All right, let's go to the next slide. So now we're moving to client file documentation. We've been through this quite a bit over the last few months, and we've talked about it today as well. But there are specific requirements for particular ESG components. In particular, rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention have very stringent requirements, and there are a lot of them. We've covered most of them, but we still have a few stragglers here that we wanted to bring to mind and to have documented here on our ESG office hours for your later evaluation, maybe on our website if you had forgotten. But for rapid rehousing and HP, they require evaluation documentation in the client file, and it's a regular reevaluation, and it's something that we look for. It's part of our checklist. We have to check to see if our grantees are reevaluating their clients for rapid rehousing every 12 months to certify that the client doesn't exceed the 30% of the AMI, and that the client lacks sufficient resources and support networks to stay housed without continuing ESG funds. The rapid rehousing clients, they don't need to meet the 30% AMI at the beginning, but moving forward and in the reevaluation, they do. And I'm going to hold here. And Tuesday, do you have anything on this or the rest of the team?
What I will just clarify is that for rapid rehousing, they need to be reevaluated at least every 12 months. And it's every 12 months from when they're housed. A lot of times your rapid rehousing clients have entered into HMIS as rapid rehousing clients long before that you actually get them into housing. You're working with them to get all their ducks in a row, to get applications, to make it so that they're able to rent. It's really 12 months from the time that they move into their rental.
Thank you, Tuesday. And so let's jump to the next slide for homelessness prevention. And once again, Tuesday and I will handle this one, and I will kick it off with every 3 months, you have the same certification. And we also want to emphasize that when we are monitoring homelessness prevention, it requires client files for all line items listed on the DER. Whereas it might just be 2 line items for others. Once you reach a certain number of RFFs for HP, it's a special category, and it requires client files for all for supporting documentation for all line items listed on a particular DER. And I will kick it to Tuesday to see if she had any additions there.
It kind of says it, but just reminding you that when we're saying all line items, we're talking about for homelessness prevention, we monitor all participant supports that are given. So any rental assistance, deposit assistance, rental arrears, those kinds of things. So we're going to look at all client files for every month that you have a client on there, as opposed to we for payroll and those kinds of things, it would still be the 2 line items for that. A lot of times there's a lot of payroll involved with HP.
Thank you, Tuesday. Appreciate it. And Gio, if we could go to the next slide. And a little more on client file documentation. And for rapid rehousing and HP, we've put a list here to identify the activities, because we touched on this earlier about in the DER classifying the activity correctly. And so here is a little cheat sheet for you. And relocation and stabilization services under financial assistance. And you see the example to the right of the list. So relocation stabilization would include security deposits, application fees, utility payments, and utility arrears. For rental assistance, that would include rental assistance and rental arrears. And then relocation and stabilization service non-financial assistance could be staff cost and other related expenses. And we could go into a little more detail here, the rental assistance. Make sure the line item description should be the month of assistance. For example, April rent or HMS number, blah, 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 blah. Prorated rent should say prorated and then the month. Prorated, March rent, and then the HMIS number of the particular client. And let's jump to the next slide. And it looks like now we are at indirect cost. Am I correct, Gio?
Yes.
Okay, Tuesday
Like to
is
me.
to step in now as she is our indirect cost expert. Well,
No, I don't know
she's
about expert, but I'm the
on that, but
person.
to me, she's an expert. So please, Tuesday, take it away.
Just a couple things that we have, a few reminders we have about indirect costs. When your group is taking indirect costs for subawardees and their subs, you must use the modified total direct costs, and the indirect cost calculator will help you determine which costs are eligible. This is an example of like emergency shelter and rapid rehousing costs. When you've calculated in the indirect cost calculator, this is going to be the line item that you use on your DER. If your organization includes indirect costs on a DER, you need to upload the IDC calculator in eService. This helps us determine that your costs were calculated correctly, and the total indirect cost for each component auto-fills into the cost overview tab as seen on here. This is the front page, which is the cost overview. Next slide. Reminder that that you need to use the modified total direct costs, and these are some examples of the modified total direct costs that are allowed and aren't allowed. Equipment and staff costs, supplies, and materials are all eligible for taking indirect costs on, and things like equipment, participant support costs, which in this case is rental assistance, rental security deposits, and that kind of thing, are not eligible for indirect costs. The calculator that we've provided does a better, more comprehensive job of letting you know which costs are and are not allowed for eligible for indirect costs. Next slide. Should be on 28. For your indirect costs, you do not need to have an activity number, as you see here on this mock-up of a DER. The IDC will be a single line item for each cost. For each component. So this is emergency shelter. This is from the calculator that I showed you a little bit earlier, the $675. That was from that calculator. It's the line item is going to say 15% MTDC from the indirect cost calculator, or something along those lines that makes sure that we know that you've calculated that from the indirect cost calculator. And again, you'll use that directly from as a line item directly from the component as listed on the indirect cost calculator. All right, next slide. For sub awardees, we want to remind you that subgrantees are not required to admit the indirect cost calculator to HCD, but they still must use the modified total direct cost concept. So if you're if you're giving us a request for funds for a sub-awardee that you have, we don't need the calculator, but you should be making sure and assuring that they are applying indirect costs correctly using the modified total direct cost. So I would recommend providing them the calculator so that they at least understand what is and is not eligible for indirect costs. Some not-for-profits have their own NICRA, and they can use those award amounts, those rates on their NICRA for their indirect costs. You need to make sure that they have that in place and that you've reviewed it and that they are consistently applying that NICRA. But that's your responsibility for your sub-awardee. If your sub-awardee does not have a NICRA, in place, then they are entitled to take the 15% de minimis, just like any other grantee is. Subs indirect costs are your direct costs. So this is a example of this. It's a direct cost for our sub grantee, and you take it as a direct cost like this. And this is provider one, 15% of their modified total direct cost. On the DER, your sub indirect cost will also be a single line item. So and their sub award indirect cost will be a line item before your indirect costs if you're taking it both ways. I think that was all the things that I had that were pertinent that have come up recently, but I'm sure that there's lots of questions. So if anybody has indirect cost questions, I'd be happy to kind of deal with them right now.
There's currently no questions in the question and answer box or the chat.
Nice.
Well, fantastic. I'll give it about 30 more seconds to see if anyone is typing away. Thank you, Tuesday. For those of you who work with indirect costs and understand indirect costs, I envy you, as every time I have to work in them, I only get more confused. And especially when I get into the regs, boy, the CFR 200 financial regs for indirect costs. But that's what we're here for, and we're always happy to assist. And so, feel free to ask us questions on those. We get some challenging questions on those, and it's always great to learn new things about them. And let's see, Amanda, anything else?
We actually have one new comment. Please confirm that staff costs for each person include wages and benefits. And the answer is yes.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
All right.
And one more thing. We have to calculate those for each person since our contractor doesn't provide them that way.
If your contractor provides them in a different manner, what I want you to do is to list them out on your DER in the way that your contractor or provider is giving you their documentation. So I do understand that sometimes you're getting payroll and they're giving you a separate document or charge for their benefits or insurance costs like that. You will, because that's the way it's being the supporting documentation is in place. You would list it that way. So, and we're happy to review anything that you have if you have questions about that.
She said thank you, Tuesday. And that's it.
Fantastic. And so, Gio, are we on the question slide right now?
Oh, yeah, we've been on it.
Okay, thank you. Can you move to the next slide? And thank you, everyone. Those were some great questions. We really appreciate it. So the ESG resources, we have a ton of information on our ESG webpage. You can click on it and find training, policy, archives, all kinds of good stuff, and answer a lot of the questions, a lot of policy information also on indirect cost, components, just about anything you will need in the administration of your ESG program. We also want to share the ESG program team contact email. Once again, the ESG NOFA inbox, monitored Monday through Friday during normal business hours. We will get back to you within 48 hours at the latest. And next slide, please. Please follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. Next slide, please. And as always, we wrap up with this slide. You can go to jobs.cal.gov. and you can observe all of the openings here at Team HCD. We all are pretty much on the same team right now anyway, us and our grantees. We have a very similar mission, and here at HCD, we are always looking for great new team members to add. And as I've mentioned before, a lot of our team members come from our grantees, and it's always nice to have that new perspective and share their input in how we manage this and administer this program. One last reminder that this is the last standalone office hours of 2026. Moving forward, April 21st, 2026, we will have the combined office hours with the HPD department here at HCD. And once again, we received the information that about 88% of you have not received the email yet. We will double check with our outreach team to make sure that those emails went out to the correct addresses, and follow up with your grant representative or the NOFA inbox if you do not hear anything within the next 24 hours or so. In the meantime, have a great rest of this warm day, and we will see you at the combined office hours next month in April. Thank you. Take care.